Hello, everyone. This is yet another webinar about career talks by Welcome Solutions. In these web meetings, we chat with PhDs and other professionals who rock out their jobs and who can tell us about their careers. And today, I have a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Eric James Stephens, who in 2018 earned his PhD in Rhetoric, Communication and Information Design from Clemson University, where he learned the importance of learning about others, helping their stories, and helping to amplify their voices in a meaningful way that leads to action. And today, he is actively working on helping PhDs in professional development as the founder of Higher Ed, Change Higher Ed, and Thousand Plateaus Consulting. His organization's goals are to highlight the value of higher ed workers as they migrate to industry, government, and nonprofit jobs outside of academia. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Eric. Great to have you here. And now I would like to give the floor to you so that you can introduce your story from your own perspective.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you first so much for letting me come in here and participate in your platform. As someone who has now my own platform, I understand the value that it has and just kind of like opening up yourself to people. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you. My story is, well, I'll say this, like, yeah, I'll go with my story. Let's see. Like, so I started out, my wife and I, we were both teaching at a university in Washington State in the United States. And I kind of knew this past spring, like in the early spring, that my job was kind of like in the air. COVID made it apparent that it was going to drop and not be in the air anymore. And so I kind of had a moment to really, really internalize this really like this enormous black void that was happening that comes with unemployment. And that's just a hard thing to do. And I think kind of what has made my story resonate with people is that I'm kind of just like 10 to 15% ahead of what people are experiencing. Like I felt the weight of that unemployment that was happening because of COVID, especially in higher academia, like 2 months before most people, I feel. And so when I was going through that dark depression mode, and not really knowing what to do, I realized that I wasn't the only person who was experiencing it or the only person that would be experiencing it. And I had been just applying to just, I don't know, a ton of jobs. I think I applied to over 150 jobs in about a month or two. And I had one unsuccessful interview that made me feeling, like I was pretty much worthless. And my academic community just wasn't there in a way that I had hoped and expected them to be there. Academics, like I went on to LinkedIn to go connect with people and to get a job that way, and the whole hidden job market thing. And the academics just don't get on LinkedIn. That's just not something that they do. It's something that I hope that they start doing. But I can't control that. And so I was looking for that community and it wasn't there. And it makes sense. A lot of it, I blamed those people at first, because like, look at this hardship that I was experiencing. Why doesn't anybody really care or like even are really trying to help in a way that was meaningful to like a community extent. And then I realized that I couldn't be blaming them because there was a pandemic happening. I mean, there were so many things that were going on in their lives. They had family members that were sick. They were on the precipice of losing their own jobs. And so I've learned really to kind of not blame academia for that particular thing, as much as I just need to own that it's been hard for everybody. And so what I did, I decided it was May 19th. It was the day I made a post on LinkedIn that said, I'm going to just stop applying to jobs, at least the way that I was before. And I'm just going to focus on treating LinkedIn as what it is, a social media platform, not something to just like not a fancy job site. It's a social media platform that is doing some really, really cool work that other social media platforms just aren't aren't doing or are not able to do. And for an example of that, I'd encourage you to go look at the recent article in the New York Times that was published about Liz Liba and the Black LinkedIn movement or initiative that's happening. It's just been this organic thing that hasn't really been able to happen on other platforms, I think. And so anyway, there's some really cool things that can happen on LinkedIn when you actually engage. And so that's what I wanted to do, was really focus on developing my own professional identity. And I thought, what better way to do that than to kind of bring people together and to build that community that I myself had been wanting. So it was set for June 8th. I thought I was being very clever. It was in the United States, National Best Friends Day. And I thought, hey, this will be great. Like, come party with your best friends on a new social media platform. And essentially, like, I wrote this article that said, if you are employed right now, the most ethical thing that you can do is to go support your friends on LinkedIn, and to go give them endorsements, give them recommendations, let them like connect with them, talk with them, because honestly, you don't know when you're going to need that yourself. And if the hidden job network is in fact hidden, and you're so hidden from that job market that you're not participating in a way that can help people find jobs, then you're doing a disservice. And I actually argued that it was an ethical thing that you should do in this moment during a pandemic, to get on LinkedIn and connect with people. And the reason for that is because this is the only social media network that employers actively use to use the data to find people. And so the idea is to get people together to flood the LinkedIn algorithms with data. What it came across as, and what it really was, honestly, was just like a desperate plea for someone who's going through this dark moment, try to get to connect to people. Like, I was reaching out to people individually, and it just wasn't happening. And so I thought, hey, maybe I can just bring people together. And then Black Lives Matter erupted across the country. And I thought that, one, I didn't want to try to compete with any sort of publicity or anything like that. And also, I wanted to, like, as soon as I recognized that I was building this platform, it became, this kind of goes into my research of what I did for my dissertation. It became my ethical obligation to internalize what was happening, and to see what I could do to build my my platform out for the betterment of other people. And so with that, I conducted over the next 2 months. When all that was happening, we were in Washington. My wife was 8.5 months pregnant, and our lease was up, and our landlord wouldn't let us renew our lease for a short term to see what was going to happen. So we moved into a little tiny house and packed up about 50% of our belongings into a storage unit. And then my wife had the baby at home. So home birth, we had our third little baby, Max. And then we packed up the rest of our things. So about 90% of our things are in storage in Washington. And we moved across the country to Maryland, where my parents live. And we're living in their basement right now, because during that move, my wife, who also worked for the university, also found out that she was unemployed. Like, that was a pretty abrupt finding, because honestly, her department was asking her about preparatory questions, and like, as if she was responding to students who were enrolled in her classes, until she was laid off. I mean, there was no warning, and it was very poorly done, I think. But so all of this was happening. I moved my family, like this background, that this is actually my childhood bedroom that my parents turned into a storage unit that I've turned into my makeshift office, as a way to try to like figure out what to do. And so during all of this, I got to work. I recognized that something was happening. And I felt like, for those of you who are familiar with the musical Alexander or Hamilton, right? So I really connected with the character when he's like saying like riding like he's running out of time. Like I felt like I was racing against something and I didn't know what it was, and I'm still trying to figure out what that is and I'm racing against. But I just started producing content and making a presence on LinkedIn, and I eventually over that few months and a cross country move and new baby and all that, we also got a dog you might be able to hear in the background. I conducted over 100 informational interviews, just approaching people saying, hey, this is a thing I'm doing. Do you want to be involved? and it turned from this 1-hour plea in June into a 2-day conference in August. I had 50 speakers. We had 19 workshops, and we had 9 live streamed panels that are still available on YouTube. And we had over 280 people that were registered for the event, about an average of 15 to 20 people per event, including the workshops for most of them. And it was this beautiful thing where people came together and recognized that there's that higher education is crumbling. Like it's crumbling before our eyes. Higher ed, a couple of weeks ago, said that there's been a 58% reduction in jobs postings this time last year. Chronicle of Higher Education came out last week and said that this time last year, over 337,000 estimated jobs have been lost in higher education. That's just in the United States. I mean, it's crumbling. And people came together to say, we want to help. And I think that's what's beautiful about people who work in education, as this sense of altruism and just wanting to help people. And I think that should be valued and not taken advantage of, like it's often taken advantage of in education. And so it was this hugely successful thing in my eyes. And I thought after that, this all started with me trying to get a job. And then it turned into me wanting to build something. And I'm still on the lookout for a job. I'm still unemployed. I've had some fun interviews, which I think are going well. But I've also really cautious of hope because I've just been shat on for the past few years as far as opportunities go. But I mean, that's how where I got to where I am now. Now I'm doing these weekly episodes where I invite experts to come in and talk about things. And Natalia, you're going to be coming on in hopefully in December, January-ish, hopefully December, about the idea of leaving academia and what you've done to kind of find your people and that community again, because leaving academia is akin to leaving a religion, like leaving a community. And it's one that you devote your life to. It's one that I've devoted my life to. And now I was kind of being forced to leave out. And so I wanted to create a space where people could come together. And that's hopefully what I've been able to do and what I want to continue to do.
Okay, fantastic, Eric. Thank you so much for this introduction. And thank you also for answering my first question, which was, what is this hipster place that you are in? So now we know. And I think, my first thought is that, once you discover your mission, then it's hard to really let go for 9-to-5 type of job. So in a sense that I want to say that I wish you get a job, but in a way I also don't, because I think once you have that mission to help PhDs, I think it's good to find a way to monetize on it in a way that you can pursue this mission. And I hope you don't end up in a bank or something, just doing 9-to-5 type of job. You don't waste your talent there. So I hope that the situation gets resolved so that you can do what you do full time. Okay, so one comment I have for the audience: if you have questions, please ask in the chat, and we will be taking questions as they arrive. Okay, so this is very touching story, Eric, what you've just said, and actually I was quite unprepared for it. I was just, usually when I do these webinars, I have very generic stories about education and choices in the education history, and then jobs, and I wasn't even aware that you have that quite dramatic story with actually losing a job and moving to your parents' place and actually living in the basement. That's I don't, this is one of these rare moments when I don't even know what to say, because it's something that is so remote from my experience. That, I mean, I also had hard times after my PhD contract expired, I have to say, and sometimes also financially hard. But I think I live in a place like Netherlands is much more protective as a country, and it's also protective of small entrepreneurs. And if you have hard times like this corona crisis these days, then you can count on some additional financial benefits. So they want they don't want you to get depressed, and dysfunctional. So you get some bonuses and benefits if you're unemployed or if you're a small entrepreneur. So I think my experience right now, even though it's hard times, it cannot compare to your experiences as a resident of US and a citizen of US. So I mean, I feel for you, but I feel, I don't have comparable situation to yours. So I can only say that I'm very sorry to hear what I just heard. But let's just maybe talk about the bright side. So I guess you just discovered your passion. That's also the good side of the situation. And could you please tell us a little bit more about who is involved in your project? And since you have like 3 different projects at the same time, I would like to understand better what you do and how these projects relate to each other, and also who you work with on, or who you would be willing to work with, and how you see your projects, and do you have a plan for the development?
Yeah, I think that I can speak to some of those things, and I think that, like I was saying before, I will say that, like, we've been fortunate, like we're like we both are receiving unemployment, which is, it's just something, like, in the United States is a hard thing to admit, and like to be like, yeah, and like rather like it's kind of like this, like, coming from like a place of shame almost, like, because like in the United States it's like, like it's like you go and you get it, like, it's just, I mean, that's what the American Revolution was, and it's just like there's this sense of an indoctrination, not in like a bad way, like like just that entrepreneurial spirit, I think is embedded in United States in just a different way. And so, but what comes with that is, like, when it's not working, there's something that is wrong. And this goes back, actually, like we can throw this back to the colonies, right? I mean, there's this guy, Cotton Mather. He was saying that the best way to worship God was to make money. That's a very problematic thing to say, but how this connects to academia, right, is that it's the same thing, but and replace money with publications. And that's just a rant that I can go on, I think, maybe we could talk about it. So I'll actually answer your question about, like, who's involved, like, what am I doing? So here was the approach that I took. That I am, like, I came from my dissertation and my PhD project doing a lot of ethics research, and getting really involved in social justice initiatives and things like that. And there's something there's a glaring issue when I step into those spaces, is that I embody nearly every privilege that exists. I'm a white guy, so white guy, straight, married, I have kids, like almost everything that's out there, like, yeah, like check, and that's me. And what that means is that I believe that it becomes my responsibility to use that privilege, in the words of DeRay McKesson in an interview with Stephen Colbert, right, is to acknowledge my privilege so that I can then dismantle it. And the way that I have been approaching that is by not coming out and saying, hey, everybody, this is why you should listen to me. Like, this is what you should be doing right now. Instead, what I do is say, hey, everybody, here's my situation that I'm in. Here's my story that you will likely be able to relate to, because you are either going through it, you're about to go through it, or you know someone who's going through it. And I'm not offering advice. The only advice I'm offering is genuinely is to make sure you're connecting with people. And that's the question that you were asking, right? Is which people to connect with. For me, and going back to, let me finish that other thought, that it becomes my obligation then to build this platform, because I'm able to build a platform in a way that other people without privilege would not be able to. And it's by virtue of me just having this privilege that exists. Like, I acknowledge that. And then inviting people who do know what they're talking about to come and talk about it. to invite experts, to invite thought leaders. And for whatever reason, when I say, hey, look, here's Natalia, she's going to be a thought leader about this thing that we're doing in a couple of weeks, for whatever reason, because of that privilege that I have, people listen to that. And that's what I've been trying to build. And so, like, there's a lot of programs that try to find like these really big names and all these things. They end up paying speaking fees when acknowledging and realizing that there are some amazing people that have incredible knowledge that we're just ignoring because they haven't had as much time to, like we were talking about earlier in this conversation, to get like to promote themselves as much. They've just had more time to promote.
Yeah, I have one comment because I think that you really diminish your own achievements here. Because I also think that it's not that all these people who you invite would just join just anyone online. And I think you have some particular talent or a particular type of charisma that people also get attracted to you and to share their ideas and their insights at your platform. So I think, because you introduce yourself as this person that is just there as a connector, but I think it's not that everyone could do what you do. So I would like to acknowledge that also. And I also don't accept every invitation that I get. And I think that most of the people that you host also are the same. So I think that there is something about you as well that you can get all these people meet at your platform, right?
I really appreciate that you said that. Honestly, this is kind of something that I've been sharing with people. One of my very favorite and probably the most influential philosophers who has like impacted my day-to-day thinking is her name is Adriana Cavarero. She's an Italian feminist philosopher who's just amazing. And one of the core concepts that she has in one of her books is this idea that there is true value in hearing your own story told back to you. Because I come to this story that I'm telling, and I cannot, because of just how I've been trained to think in my graduate school, I can't separate like who I am and from what I'm doing. And I just I go back this like back and forth of like, well, is this just because I'm charismatic, or is it because of this other thing? And I think there's this messy combination of the two. What I'm trying to say is thank you for seeing that and for saying that, because it's hard for me to see that in my own story. And this goes back to, again, why you should connect with people, because you need to be able to establish value outside of academia. The only thing that academia values is your publication and where that publication came from. And that's a bullshit thing to value you on. What you should be valuing yourself on is what you do. And the best way to understand that and to interpret that is to talk to somebody else, to find that person. And for me, I think that, it's a combination of my charisma. I mean, I've been, I can't deny I have a PhD in rhetoric and persuasion. I mean, that's what I do is I can persuade people to do things. When I was in fourth grade, I would sell cinnamon toothpicks, or I was the kid that like had the beaded lizards, selling them on the bus, or like I never played with Pokemon cards, but I understood that there was a need for Pokemon cards in school, and so I sold them. Like that was me. I was that guy. I was like Red in Shawshank Redemption, but not nearly as cool of a voice. Thank you, Morgan Freeman, for that.
Actually, there is a question that came to my mind, but I wasn't sure if I can really ask this question. But once you actually mentioned about rhetorics, then I will dare to ask it. So, is this major helpful by job interviews, actually?
So are you asking, so is this like ability, like, so the ability to interview, is that kind of the question? Okay, yeah. I think that's a hard question for me to answer, because here's what I feel about my experience getting a PhD in rhetoric. And this might be like downplaying my ability to think and kind of leaning more on the charisma that you were kind of talking about before. But I kind of feel like I got my PhD in rhetoric because I'm really, really good at rhetoric, rather than I studied it really, really hard. Like if you come in and you start engaging me about people's names and rhetorical principles and things like that, like you give me like 10, 15 minutes to catch up, and don't care that if I forget names, then we can have a hell of a conversation. But if you're relying on the depth of my knowledge about regurgitating theories from other people rather than doing my own thinking, I don't know, you'll be disappointed in the conversation that you have with me. And so to answer your question, I think that, yeah, the way that I approached the study of rhetoric was one of a place of a type of ethics that places the other person first. And so for me, the purpose of rhetoric, or Aristotle said, rhetoric is using all available means around you to be persuasive, or something like that. And that's what I was trained to do. Like things that are happening around me, like my story, like this background, for example, in one of my first interviews with somebody said, hey, maybe can you blur that? It's kind of distracting. And I said, nope. This is an actual decision that I am making to show the position that I am in. And the reason that I am doing that is to add to my ethos, to my credibility. And so there are times when I have to, I feel like I have to watch myself. And I feel like I need to be constantly reassessing the things that I am saying to make sure that I'm not being persuasive in the negative term, which is manipulation. Persuasion and manipulation are the same word, right? Manipulation is a negative word. I don't want to manipulate people. I could absolutely be accused of everything that I'm doing and doing the same thing for the same motives, be accused of manipulation. People like that exist, and they do. I mean, they're bullshit reasons, and they're coming from people who have tenure in academia, honestly. But I'm learning to let go of caring about those opinions.
Okay. All right. I was just curious if this story of studying rhetorics helps you in getting jobs. That's the thing that I was curious about. But I'm not sure if that the answer is yes or no, actually. So how do you feel about this?
I think that's a complicated answer, or a complicated question, because and here's why, right? Rhetoric itself is a meta discipline. It's a discipline above all other disciplines, because no other discipline can exist without the use of rhetoric. Whether you're a chemist, a biologist, an anthropologist, a sociologist, whoever you are, you communicate through rhetoric. And so to answer your question, like, do you need rhetoric in order to find a job? The answer is absolutely yes. The better you understand rhetoric and the art of persuasion, the better you know how to tailor your documents to your audience. What document do you want to tailor? A resume. Who's your audience? An employer. I mean, the act of getting a job is a rhetorical act. Whether or not you acknowledge that probably means you're not very good at it. The people who go out and get jobs and make a presence for themselves, who make a name for themselves, like you're doing, Natalia, right? You are employing rhetoric. I would argue that you could do whatever it is that you're doing. You could take it from here to here by understanding what it is that you're doing when you're actively communicating. Because there are rhetorical decisions being made, right? Like your background is a rhetorical decision when you go into a meeting or when you go into a job, right? What I'm wearing right now, I've just owned that I love wearing white t-shirts. So if I went into a job interview the other day and I was like, you know what, this is who I am. This is my background. I have a white t-shirt. You have this job. You approached me about this job and you want me for it. And so I'm going to be authentic when I do that. I acknowledge that I can do that as a white male easier than women can, and people of color can. That's part of rhetoric, is understanding that and not manipulating it and taking advantage of it. But for me, just saying like, it's okay. It's okay to just be wearing this white t-shirt, because that would be encouraging other people to just be them as well.
Great.
Did I answer your question? Yeah,
go ahead. I love it. I totally. I mean, I think maybe you should consider casting your own panel about rhetoric and using it in applying for jobs. I will be the first person to sit in the panel as a participant. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I totally agree with everything you just said. I think every time you have to introduce yourself, you have to make a pitch, and you have to decide from which angle you want to pitch yourself. Of course, it's when I think about it, yes, like it is indeed an act of rhetorics, and I mean, it's a pity that the life is so short and you can't study everything. Like I did 3 different masters in my undergrad, and like I never had space for rhetorics. So I think life is too short to really catch everything. But I think I'm really happy for you that you had a chance to really study the subject. It must be fascinating. And actually, I have another question. Because you also talked about like how you pitch yourself and how you present yourself. So actually, I have a question that is a bit out of the box, which is about your tattoo. So I noticed that you have a very interesting tattoo on your forearm. So could you please tell us a little bit about the philosophy behind it?
Yes. Okay. So yeah, here's my tattoo. So I'll kind of like just like.
Impressive. Very nice.
And it kind of comes in and kind of comes like that a little bit. So I love it. Okay, I'm so happy you asked about that. Can I just say? It started with this tattoo, because this is actually pretty relevant to what we're talking about. I knew for a long time that I wanted a tattoo. I knew that I wanted it to be big, and bold, and I wanted it to be visible. So I knew that I wanted it to be on my forearm. I came from a very religious upbringing, which was not a fan of tattoos. I'm in a relationship. My wife is still part of that faith and that religion. And I think we're navigating a mixed faith marriage very successfully. And so I was really worried about getting this tattoo. And so I was like, I'm going to get a band right here. She's like, okay, maybe you should get a second one, because one will just look a little bit weird. I was like, that's, rather than being mad about it, she's like, okay, let's do this. And so for me, the problem with the tattoo is that it has meaning. And the problem with meaning is that meaning is fluid. It changes. I cannot control the meaning of a thing. If I get someone's name tattooed on my arm, and then that person like ends up being a murderer, now I have this murderer's name tattooed on my arm, right? Or if like there's this symbol that represents something, but then something happens and that becomes a symbol of hurt. So I knew that I needed something that had no meaning. So I got this, just 2 stripes. It was just this purely decorative, and I loved it. And as soon as I finished it, I was driving home, and I knew immediately that I wanted another one. I needed another one.
Yeah.
And then
they say it's very, very, very addictive, actually.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was like this. I mean, it was like a painful thing to happen, but then I was just like in this weird extra space where I was like, okay, that pain is happening to me, but not really, because I'm over here thinking about the pain. It was just like this really weird thing. So anyway, I knew that I wanted a sleeve, like one that went from wrist to shoulder. Actually, like it kind of comes back to right back here too. It extends down my back. And so I thought a long time about what I wanted to do. I thought about like the tree thing that you see a lot. And I'm like, I just see that a lot. I don't know if I want that. And so I decided that to trust the artist, because I realized that a tattoo artist is an artist, and my arm is a canvas. And so I shopped around to a couple different shops. I wanted a shop that had collectively great talent, not just one person, because I didn't want to wait for one particular person. I wanted to go to a good shop. And so I found one, Tim at Cyclops Tattoos in Yakima, Washington. shout out to like one of the best experiences ever getting a tattoo. But I walked in, I was like, all right, man. I said, you're an artist. My arm is a canvas. I have some ideas. Let's go. Let's do this. And he's like, wait, really? Like, you don't care? I was like, well, I care, but like, let's think about it. Let's make this collaborative project. And so he'd get like a paintbrush and he'd paint on my arm, or he'd get markers and just like, and trace out everything. If we liked it, we ink over it. And if we didn't, we'd wipe it away. There'd be like parts like right here. We were trying to think of like, oh, like what should we do? And like this other dude came in. He's like, what if we came in with just some like straight angles? And so Tim and I were like, okay. So we had like 2 or 3 other people's input for this tattoo. It took 4-hour sessions, but I wasn't under the needle for 4 hours each time. It was like, let's try this and like play with it, and then let's change this around. And like there's just like different pieces. Like this part right here is kind of like a little shatter piece, like a little abstract, and like this little paintbrush, this little explosion. And it doesn't mean anything. It has no this part means this and this part means this. And people say like, wait, is that a waterfall or is that a mountain? I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you see? It tells more about you than what it is about me, about what you see in my tattoo. And so and I love having ink because I love talking to people about just, it's a way to approach people. It's like an invitation. I think Roxane Gay in her book Hunger talked about what it meant to have ink, and it's just like this open invitation to other people who somehow identify with you because you went through that pain together. And so like it became, and what I love about it is that no one else has this. Like it is a piece of art, in the same way that like a few years ago, NCAA video games were like this guy who did this ink. It turns out that you, as the person who has the ink on your arm, do not own your ink. The artist does. And so, because they were portraying the artist's ink in a video game, and the artist was like, that's mine. You should be paying me royalties because you're using what I created on that player. And he won. And so that really hit me. And I just like embraced this idea. It's like, this is an artistic piece. I want it to be unique. And that's one of the first things that anybody talks to me about, like when they see my tattoos, like they say, I've never seen anything like that before. Can I see it?
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for your story. Actually, if I can tell my own story, I also have a tattoo, but actually I'm trying to erase it since like 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And that was one of these like mistakes, of the, young, times of teenage years. And I think, again, like this is addictive, and you land in one of the 2 attractors. You either decide that this is for you and you want more and more, or you decide that this was actually a mistake and you try to erase this piece of art on your body. And actually I am in this other category. I think I just it's just about the aesthetics. My sense of aesthetics changed, and this painting on my body like doesn't really feel beautiful anymore. And that's the reason why I also didn't really put much meaning into it. So that was not the case that I changed my philosophy or something. It was more that my sense of aesthetic changed, and then it turned out that the artist that I was working with when I was making the tattoo was really diligent, and he put so much ink in my skin that now it's almost impossible to erase it. So it's kind of funny. It's much more difficult to wipe it out than it was to actually to make it. But I totally understand everyone who likes tattoos. Like there were times when I was a big fan. And I think it's just not for me, like just judging from my own experience. But I understand everyone who makes tattoos. And but if my own kids will make tattoos, then I will just spunk them. I'm like, until you are maybe like at certain age when you're absolutely sure about your taste, you should not make it. That's my point.
Yeah. I mean, there's my kids. This is something like that we were like trying to like like, how do we tread this? I mean, my wife's, her religion's like, don't get a tattoo. And here's dad, a whole lot of tattoos. And so we're like, what do we do? It's like, like, hey, like, here's some temporary tattoos. Like, you can get like henna and like all that kind of fun stuff. But here's the thing. And I tell this to my kids too. And that same thing of like, you know what? Like, there is wisdom in waiting. It's hard to do as a kid. I mean, the prefrontal cortex is not developed to like 27, right? I think that's a great age to make that decision, because now you have a better sense of your life. But I also recognize that, what the reason I was making those decisions too. But yeah, like, I totally, like, if my kids were getting a tattoo, I'd be like, you know what, you better love it.
Yeah.
Better love it, because I'm not going to pay for it, and I'm not going to pay to get it removed.
Yeah, getting it removed is 10 times more pain and 10 times more funds. That's for sure. Okay, and can we just switch back to the topic of today's meeting? And I would like to ask you a little bit more about how you see the job market for PhDs. And my first question would be, from all these informational interviews you did in the last few months and all these events, what is your general picture of the job market for PhDs? What do you find is the biggest problem for PhDs of the job market right now?
The biggest problem for PhD markets on the job right now is twofold. Here's the thing that having a PhD you cannot control that is impacting you. People have a preconceived notion about hiring a PhD. They don't want to do it. In fact, the interview that I've had this past week, it started with me reaching out to the CEO and being like, hey, like, do you want to be a panel about this thing that I'm doing? And his first response was, I'm sorry, I don't connect with recruiters. And so my response, I'm just an unemployed academic trying to do this thing. And so he's like, oh, okay. No, like, we ended up chatting, and we got on a phone call. And one of the first things he said to me was, I would never hire a PhD. I mean, this is the CEO of an ed tech company, right? And here's the thing. He's not wrong, right? I mean, like, there's a lot of issues that come with the type of personality that gets a PhD. So that's the one thing that you're not going to be able to control. You won't be able to control anybody else's perception of having a PhD at large. Here's the second problem. The thing that you can control, and you're probably not going to want to control, is your ego. Is humbling yourself down to the point where you can say, where you can't walk into a room with those three letters PhD and expect respect, or expect that you know what you're talking about, or that they're like, oh, you have a PhD, well, therefore we should give you all of this responsibility. No, you cannot do that. It is your responsibility to humble yourself and to translate your skill to your audience. A rhetorical move, understanding who your audience is, understanding their language, and understanding that you're not the decision maker in that process. They are. Do not expect them to speak your language. That's why people don't want to hire PhDs, is because of that attitude. You know what you should do? Humble yourself. Say, I did this thing, and look at all this is how I did it. Because this is what we need to understand. This is also a rhetorical thing, right? Using stasis argumentation. We need to understand that there is a difference in value in what happens in industry versus academia. In academia, you work your ass off to get a publication or to get your dissertation published, because that is the thing that has value in academia. It's your publication. Where was it published? Who helped you write it? Right? All of these, especially for graduate students, right? And academia does not give a shit about anything you did to get to that point. They only care about that publication, which is hard to find value and self-worth in higher education, because if this standard is publication, publish or perish, and the market is so saturated of just people with PhDs, really smart people, you need to be able to come down and say, this is what I can offer you. So we have this thing, like we have what's valued is the publication. In the industry, no one cares about your dissertation. No one cares about your publication. They don't. If you ask someone in higher ed about like, what do you think about the state of higher education? They're like, oh, we're starting to see it crumble. Oh my goodness. If you ask somebody outside of higher education, they're like, well, I mean, we've seen this coming for years. I'm surprised it's taken this long. Because academics don't understand value. They don't understand their time. What is valuable in industry is not the publication. It's everything you did to get there. And it's your responsibility to translate teaching a class to learning and development. It's your responsibility to saying you designed a course for your class to curriculum development. You need to understand the language that they're using and use it to describe yourself. One of the best ways to do that, connect with people from that industry and say, hey, this is what I can do. What does that translate to? Like, what does that conversation look like? You need to understand, as sad as it is, academia will not love you back. It never will. All the effort, all that expected labor that you're supposed to do for free is not valued in academia. Do you know where you can go to make money with those same skills? Industry. There are jobs that like you can negotiate your way into, not an entry-level position, but like a junior level position, which you might need to take. Like, hey, like it's okay to take a junior level position with a PhD, because what you're doing is learning the rhetoric, the lingo, everything about the industry. They can't trust you enough to give you a full let's hear your value. There needs to be a probationary period, and you need to be okay with that. You might need to even be the one to offer it, to show that humility, to say, I don't want to be so presumptuous that my PhD means I'm qualified for this. I want to show it to you, and let me do that. What a great way to do that in COVID times, right? Where people are iffy about hiring people for the types of positions that a PhD would want, because they're not going to be like someone who just comes in and sits at a computer, 9 to 5, right? You described that previously as like something that's this horrible thing that would happen. Whereas like an opportunity that I have would be one that would like recognize that I can do this thing and give me space to do that thing, because they recognize that they want me to stay, because they see that value. So like, what can we do to give you space to do these other things so that you can stay? That's really validating to hear from on like sitting on this other end of the table. And so you asked this question, Natalia, of like, what is the biggest, like, what's the hardest complication that PhDs are facing? It's twofold. One of them you cannot control. The other one, be humble.
Yeah, this is fantastic answer to the question. It's a lot of information in one. That's a very, very massive answer to the question. So let me first say that thank you so much for talking about this taboo that many employers don't want to hire PhDs, because it's so true. And actually, my impression is that there are some career gurus out there who actually tell PhDs that they, if they stick to them, then they will get these 100K jobs day one. And this is so not true. And this is the reality is so different. So I'm glad that you actually mentioned, because I have I'm on the same page. This is so hard to actually translate your knowledge, and to also even persuade the employer to give you a shot, and not mentioning about building your position. And again, I agree with everything you said. I think that being humble is actually the best approach. And again, sometimes it's hard when you sit in one panel with someone who's basically, creating this beautiful picture that there is an El Dorado waiting for you in industry. Whereas I know from my own experience, and from experience of virtually everyone I know, that it's not true. You have to like build your name all like all over again from scratch. You're the freshman, you're the beginner, and no one cares about your publications. It's so true that what you've said. Like, I can say for myself that my papers are so specific and so specialistic that maybe 50 people in the world can even understand what the whole pipeline. So and in industry nobody ever cared when I was applying what my academic achievement was. So I totally agree.
And here's the thing about that, right? Like, you say that nobody cared about your academic achievement, and here's what we're actually saying, right? People outside of academia don't care about the same things that I care about when I'm inside academia. People understand the inherent value of a PhD. Oftentimes they can be intimidated by it. What does that mean, right? To have a PhD in this thing. Like, I don't know what that is. My brother, he's an international business guru person, right? He does these like huge deals in like 3 or 4 different continents. And he said to me, I don't understand academia and I never will. It's because we value the wrong achievements in academia. You don't need to start over, right? You don't need to be the freshman. You just need to like take a minute, humble yourself, right? And say, no, this is why I am making a lateral move. Because here's the thing, those 100K jobs are out there for the taking. And if you don't say, I'm willing to work towards that and not come out at the gate, then you're going to get those jobs. And if you don't, then I will, right? One of the conversations I had with a guy that was working for Apple, I believe. And he had a PhD in like some technical thing. And they said, hey, we want to hire for this thing. And it was just about as much as, like, just a little bit more than you'd be making as a graduate student, which is not a lot. Right. Mm-hmm. But then his next job, right, that he got out of that's now at Apple, I believe. Right. They said, oh, hey, now that you've established your value with this other like 50,000 job, whatever, we see what you can do. Your bonus is going to be the same as that salary that you had. And we're going to start you on 6 figures. Academics, PhDs are fantastic people, fantastic employees, right? If you place them in the right way, right? And if the person who has the PhD is humble enough to be learning, to understand what it is to have a PhD is the constant pursuit of knowledge, right? You're not done when you have a PhD, especially if you're trying to shift into a different industry. So like, yeah, I love what you're saying. That like about this achievement, right? But what we need to do is understand that we have incredible achievements that we have been trained to do for free. That's on academia, right? It's up to us now as a product of academia to change that.
That's true. But I also feel that on the other hand, you have to also adapt to this new expectation that now you're a part of the team and it's no longer about your own career. So on one hand, now you will not do work for free, but on the other hand, it will not just be for the sake of your own CV. So you have to sometimes compromise on the personal achievement for the sake of the achievement of the team. So that's also a trade-off that is hard for some PhDs to make. And initially they are excited to get a well-paid position in some good IT company, let's say. But then sometimes, the frustration comes because they no longer work on their own, their personal list of achievements. So it's I think there is no such thing as a perfect job, in fact. And in every environment, everywhere you go, you have to compromise on something. And that's also what I'm working on a lot. So how to find the good match between you and your job, because there's nothing like a perfect job that has all the qualities that you might possibly imagine from a job. Most people will probably put high salary on the top, but also a lot of personal freedom, but also a lot of working benefits and safety. And this list of requirements from a perfect job would be probably similar for most people, but there are no such jobs. You always have to compromise on something. So it's also, you have to know your own limitations and know how, this is a puzzle. You have to find the right match between your shortcomings and the shortcomings of the job that you're going for. So I think, eventually, even if you land a job with a good salary, there's always something that you have to compromise on, even if it's not a monetary dimension.
So here's, again, we as academics have been trained to think like that. Why should you spend 90 hours a week in the lab? Right? Why should you spend 60 hours a week doing research on top of everything else you're doing? Because you're passionate about it. Because it's like, look how good you're doing. And there's this false promise of prestige that happens. Like what you are chasing is a dream.
Yeah.
The academic job is a dream. It's not there. What happens when you understand that you've been valuing the wrong thing and the compensation that you should be receiving for that value? You're putting in all this work that you're doing because you're passionate about it, and it's fulfilling, right? That's part of the pull. That's part of the rhetorical move that academia at large makes to get people to come to graduate school, right? To actively acknowledge the idea, honestly, that someone's applying to a PhD program right now, that someone is starting a PhD program right now, when you are looking at the numbers. Have you had an honest conversation about return on investment for your PhD? No, you don't know how to have that conversation. I'm still struggling to figure out how to have that conversation, right? Because we have been trained to value different things. If you acknowledge that, you know what, your job's responsibility is not to be fulfilling to you in that way, guess what? You'll find out that you have hobbies, and that hobby includes researching. And you can do all that stuff, right? With a 9-to-5 job. You'd be getting paid a lot more. And it is, like you said, it is fulfilling to work in a collaborative team. Because when you work in a collaborative team, and when that team is successful, you are rewarded for your success. What reward do you get other than intrinsic good job, pat on the back for writing your own paper that only 50 people in the world are going to understand? I mean, it is an issue of pride and ego, and acknowledging that we have been trained to be prideful and ego by an egotistical institution. We are a product of that. And as much as we critique as much as we critique institutions, we must acknowledge that therefore we're critiquing ourselves as well. And what do we need to do as we acknowledge this change in audience, this rhetorical move? What do we need to do to convince those people that what we do have is value? That becomes our responsibility. We can't expect industry to do it. Otherwise, we just feed industry's reason for not hiring us.
Actually, when I was writing these papers, I felt that it was not that much about my, because since you referred to ego, I felt it was not as much about me, my desire to be recognized or famous. It was more about my internal feeling that since I'm paid from taxes, I'm supposed to deliver, and that society waits for my results. And I felt that I don't deliver something that is worth the whole value of my PhD 4-year PhD contract, and that was my concern. I didn't really feel, I deliver. So, but I couldn't really change it. Also within the project, I was so that was the reason of frustration for me. But I think. Oh, Amanda is saying something. Okay, sorry. But actually, I think that in this place, it's maybe a good place to ask you the follow-up question, which is, so what is the advice you would like to give based on what you just said, which is, again, I agree with everything you said. So what advice would you give to PhDs who are now close to finishing their contracts?
I would get, my advice is to get active on LinkedIn, to start actively engaging as a professional on LinkedIn. Reach out to people for informational interviews, like informal interviews. Be like, hey, I see that you do business analytics. That looks kind of interesting. I feel like I have that same experience. Can we talk about it for a minute? And can you help me understand? Approach from a place of learning. I mean, that's what we're really good at, right? Is learning things. And so that's what I would recommend, that people get onto LinkedIn and start having a presence, one that comes from a place of humility. And I love your reasoning, Natalia, that you shared. And I think that our reasoning are a lot. I mean, I'm coming from like the American education system. You're coming from European education system. And we talked about those differences in values. But even like those larger systems are valued on that idea of publication. Like, your research doesn't help anybody unless it's published, right? And like the act of, anyway, that's a really interesting conversation that we can have. But I think that the concrete thing that you should do is get on LinkedIn, reach out to people, and encourage your friends to do the same.
Fantastic. And actually, I'm actually, usually I wrap up at this point, but with you, somehow I'm tempted to ask you additional question, which is a little bit about your, again, background and story arc. And maybe if you could share if there's anything, like when you look back at your career, that you might have done differently if you had the chance to do it again, something from your own story that you might share with us, and some insights about your own turns in your career that when you look at it again, you think that you might have done certain things better for yourself.
When I look back at my master's program and my PhD program, I killed it. Like, I did great, right? I wrote my thesis, I finished it essentially like a semester before most people did, defended earlier than people did. My PhD program, and while I was in my master's program, every award that was available to a graduate student, every major award that was available to a graduate student, I won. I applied for it and I won, and I got it. I did the same thing as a PhD student. I finished my entire PhD start to finish in less than 3 years. I received myself over $18,000 in funding, competitive funding, and I turned that around and I created a workshop to help 24 other people get a cumulative of over $15,000 in funding. I won Outstanding Dissertation Award. I won Graduate Instructor of the Year Award. I killed it. The thing that I wish I had done differently is doing the thing that I just talked about, is being humble about it. I think that I don't think that I went around being braggadocious. I think that's the word I'm using correctly, right? I don't know. PhD in language. But I went about it in a way that I was just confident in who I was. And I was just like, this is what it is. And like, if you whatever, then, fuck you. Like, I don't really care. And that was, I wish I had done that differently. I think that there are lots of people that I think would still want to talk to me right now if from graduate school. And like kind of my spiral out of academia, I think I burned some bridges too. Some of them I'm glad that I burned, and others I wish I could have done differently. But I like that lesson of translating who you are for other people to establish a different kind of value. It's something that I wish I had done throughout my graduate school career. I tried to do it in a way that helped other people. Like, despite like everything I was doing, and like something like 20 conferences, I had 8 publications by the time I graduated. When I graduated in 2018, I had 5 job offers across continents and universities.
Wow.
And disciplines or industries. Yeah, that's what I would do. I'd be different.
Yeah, actually, if I can say something here, I think that paradoxically, people who are high flyers, high achievers in a graduate school, sometimes they have more issues with finding their first jobs. Also because it's hard to put a stop loss on your achievement, right? So once you feel appreciated, then it's harder to take this decision to leave. And I sometimes, I also find this among the people who come to me through the company or through the foundation, that I can see this rule almost, that people who were underdogs in their PhD, they often find themselves better jobs and then transition much faster, just because they make this decision early on that they want to leave. And for people like you who are high flyers, then sometimes this process is much more painful. In fact, how do you feel about this?
I mean, yeah. I felt like I was prepared for the crappy job market. I knew it was shitty. And I did do well. I did, like, despite graduating early and like all those concerns, right? Like I did well. And now in this moment of being unemployed and looking at the reality of the job market and learning how to depersonalize that rejection that is inevitable. Yeah, it's hard to realize that those things don't carry the same weight. It's hard for me that those things are no longer valued in my own community that I've left.
Right.
I have found other people outside of academia and outside of my circles that value the things that I have done. And that's what LinkedIn has brought me. Like, I mean, the validation that I have honestly received from you as a person, Natalia, I would never have received if I had stayed in my circle in academia. I just wouldn't. And I think that's the hardest thing is that the loss that I feel from community more than the achievements. It's just that I had value before and now I don't.
Okay. Well, I mean, knowing your interpersonal skills and networking skills, I'm sure that you will find a awesome job soon. And maybe it would be also useful to mention at this point what types of positions would be particularly interesting for you, because maybe, who knows, maybe someone watches this episode and actually has an idea or has a contact that might be useful. So maybe how do you feel about this? Would you be willing to also just in a few words say something about what is your preference?
Yeah, I've learned, like I mentioned, the idea of like being a business analyst. That is very like this abstract, large thing that is like really, really specific in certain areas. And so I think that'd be really fun to do. I really enjoy leadership type positions where I can have a team working together. I'm not very, I would rather think of big picture type things than little picture things, and have someone else who really enjoys doing that
Right.
to do that rather than me do it.
Yeah, I would. I can imagine. Like, I see you as a leader as well. So I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. So let's hope that someone has an idea watching this episode. And lastly, can I ask you, what shall we wish you for? What would you wish for yourself in the incoming months and years?
To not be living in my parents' basement anymore. To have our own space would be wonderful. I love my parents and it's a great experience, and I'm grateful that they're letting my family stay here. It'd be really nice to have our own space again.
Right. Yeah, I wish you that from the bottom of my heart. I hope that it will resolve soon. And yeah, I can imagine it's a difficult situation. I didn't have easy time after my contract expired myself, and yeah, I really hope that yeah, you'll. I'm sure you'll land some cool job. I just hope that you'll still have enough time to help PhDs, do what you do now. So that's my hope. But I don't have a doubt on my mind that you will soon have an amazing job. And thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your insights. I think it's very refreshing, and I again I agree with all your points, and I think it's very very good that you mentioned some of these things, because I think that some of them are like taboos, like rarely mentioned in the public space, but so true. And thank you so much. And if you could just tell some words of goodbye to our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Natalia, for having me on here, and for Amanda for chiming in live, and for the people who are watching this later. Thank you for listening and becoming part of that network and that community. And I hope that you engage with it. I really, really do. I hope that you connect with me, connect with Natalia if you haven't already, and make those connections known. Not only for the human network aspect of it because of that need, but also to feed data algorithms. Like, do it in a space where it can be mutually beneficial for you.
Okay, fantastic, and good luck with your higher ed project. I'll put the links to the project in the description of this episode, so I hope that more people actually check it out, guys. If you see this episode, please check out Eric's project. Very interesting, and all the panels are you can join the panels and you can watch the panels. I think the registration is free. Is that true, Eric?
Yep. Everything's free.
Fantastic. So please check it out, and also connect to Eric on LinkedIn. And of course, if you have any questions, please ask in the description, and we will take all your questions. And please, connect with us. And thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day.